This next panel is all about how songwriters and artists can make money from their music. So we'll be talking about everything from copyright, streaming, to live shows, and the different ways to monetize your career in a digital age. So I've got three amazing guests with me from different areas of the music industry who'll talk to you over the next hour or so. We'll leave a bit of time at the end for some questions. So panelists. Starting with Chris, can you introduce who you are and what you do, who you work with, and things like that?
So my name's Chris. I run a management company called Fat Penguin Management, based just south of Birmingham, managing about 4 artists now, a couple of producers, do a load of other stuff as well. One of the big artists I manage is an artist called Joe Dolman, who's quite big now in the Latin American markets. And I also run Pivotal Music Conference, which exists in Birmingham. Had its first year last year, and we're back in September for a second year.
Great. Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Hingley. I'm an artist. I managed our band, my band's called False Advertising, and I'm also in the band for about 4 years. We've only just got a manager ourselves, been kind of pretty much completely DIY up until this point, so we've done a lot of things by ourselves. And I'm also a graphic designer. That's like basically my day job. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so I have worked with a lot of bands on music projects, sort of people like Arctic Monkeys and Noel Gallagher and things like that.
Okay, cool. My name is Stephen Brown. I'm the regional organiser for the Musicians Union in the Midlands, which covers the East and West Midlands. So we represent, help and advise our members in terms of their music industry careers. The MU offers legal advice and stuff like that, one-to-one career advice. In terms of my own background, I'm a singer-guitarist. I still play in my own band. The band's been together for about 25 years now. We obviously don't do as much stuff as we used to do because I got a full-time day job, but we still go out and tour, still go to Europe and stuff like that, do festivals and what have you. So kind of everything that we've done ourselves as a DIY collective, and I've also done a bit of tour management for Gut Records in the past and written kind of blogs for music fanzines and stuff like that.
Great, and I should probably introduce who I am properly. So my name is Dan Jones. I'm the outreach manager for the north of England for PRS Music. If you don't know what we do, we're an organisation that pays royalties to songwriters and composers whenever their music is used publicly, and I'll talk about that a lot more. My background was, I went to Staffordshire University, so I've lived in Stoke for 3 years. Rehearsed at Steve's Tremolo Studios, and it just occurred to me in the last panel that he was laughing at how bad my band were and how we only rehearsed about once a week, and he'd put us on support at the Sugar Mill, supporting some like touring new metal bands, but now I know he thought we were shit, but I thought he was good. But yeah, there we go. It's kind of broken my heart a little bit, but yeah. So we'll start with a big question. How hard is it for an artist to make money in the digital age? Is it harder than it's ever been because there's so much more competition out there, so much oversaturation, or is it easier because there's new revenue streams popping up all the time? Anyone?
I think it's. I mean, we've only been around for 4 years, and we started our band from. Obviously, you start from a very small place, and then you kind of grow very gradually. So I haven't really known any different. So I feel like we're at the point where we can sort of sustain ourselves in terms of the music in the band kind of pays for itself, and any money that we get left over, we kind of put it in a bank account, and then we sort of wait until we're wanting to sort of put it to good use, if you know what I mean. So it's sort of a gradual, in general, it's been a very sort of gradual thing in terms of us making money, but we've certainly not got to the point where we can support ourselves through it. So we all work in other ways to support it as well.
Yeah. Stephen?
Yeah, well, I've seen quite a few changes in the 25 years or so that my own band's been together. I mean, when we started, we were still in the age of like having to go into a studio to record. Social media didn't exist, the digital domain. It was only kind of just starting to kick off. So there's been some changes in that respect, but I think there's also been some great opportunities in terms of that. And if you're kind of pretty savvy and on it, you can potentially maximise your income streams. But I think for bands starting out, I think it's something they need to be very, very aware of. But it is a gradual building process in terms of getting your product together, getting your songs together, making sure that before you do start putting anything out there, as the last panel discussed, everything is bang on and right before you do it, and making sure that the timing is right, really.
Yeah, and there are new revenue streams coming up all the time. Like Chris, we were briefly just talking before we started about one of the artists you work with, and it's a really new way of making money from your music.
Yeah, that for me, artists have more opportunities than ever. Yes, streaming pays rubbish, but there are so many opportunities to exploit alternative revenue streams. And as Dan alluded, I manage an artist and we make money off live streaming and tips in a completely different way to still the industry, when we pitch it and talk about it to them, is still trying to catch up with that model and that understanding of how to exploit that. So for me, actually, even the previous panel talked about lots of opportunities with co-writing, and still for me, traditional mediums are still fantastic. I still see that a band converts a fan base with a gig, and we still make a lot of money off live, and live is still a massive, massive income stream for most artists within the industry. So actually, I think artists, and you guys that are here that are artists, have more chances than ever, actually.
Yeah. So we're going to take this back to right down to the beginning of a band or an artist and the writing of a song. So Stephen, if you co-write with other people, are there any rules? Is it important to get stuff documented to make sure you're protected? Are there any kind of rules on how songwriting should be split? I
think if you're collaborating with other artists, I think there are some general principles I think that do exist. Generally, if you're writing and you're writing songs, you can look at a 50-50 split between the lyrics and the music. That tends to be generally how it's done. There are different examples. Some successful bands like U2, for instance, they write collaboratively and everything is split, equally between the bands. So I don't think there are any hard and fast rules. The only thing I would say is if you are collaborating with other writers, I think it's very, very important up front to ensure that you have some kind of understanding or written agreement between you about how you are going to work the song split. In the MU we have song share agreements that you can download off our website, for instance. And I think it is quite a salutary tale, because I've been dealing with a band, they're a metal band, and they've been going for quite some time. They didn't have any of this stuff written down, and they had a little bit of a disagreement when they had quite a successful album a few years back, and they couldn't agree amongst themselves what the split should be, because one of the members of the band started arguing that he was entitled to more than the others, and the record company response to that was to stop paying them the money from the income from sales and stuff like that. And it took us the best part of 3 or 4 years to try and get to the bottom of that and resolve it. So I think making sure from the outset that you have something in writing between you about how you're going to do the splits is critically important. It doesn't matter, I suppose, how you split it up, as long as you've got, it written down and it's fair to all those collaborators, really.
Yeah, Chris, so a lot of the people you manage are songwriters. Do they co-write with other people? How do you get it all documented and agreed? Have you encountered any issues with that?
So, in answer to the last question, no, we've not had any issues, and that is probably because we document it right at square one. I have artists that co-write with other artists, and we agree the splits as soon as the song is finished, before it leaves the studio. It's done and dusted. And we will sign something to that effect and get it sorted. And because I manage producers as well, we manage a lot of splits and things like that when they've contributed to the songwriting process. And I've managed indie bands and had this discussion over songwriting splits before, and we did a 10-track album, and before the end of the project, we listed it all out on a spreadsheet. Even if one band member was only getting 2% because they agreed they hardly contributed towards that song, that's what we listed it as. And we made sure it was all written down and agreed and signed. So, no, but that's because we're careful and we try to avoid any issues. And I think, actually, if you're going to co-write, that's really important. Be clear from the outset how you guys are expecting to see it. And before the track gets released or anything happens with it, make sure that's all agreed and done and dusted.
That's great advice. So when a song is created and recorded, there's actually two copyrights in a song. There's the actual song, so the composition, so the songwriter will get paid that, or the composer, and there's also a separate copyright in the sound recording, also the master rights. I encounter so many people, that's one of the fundamental things you should kind of know as a songwriter or a composer or even an artist. I speak to a lot of artist managers who don't understand that. And yeah, Stephen, how important do you think it is for an artist to kind of understand the fundamentals of copyright? It does sound dull, but I do talks at universities and colleges throughout the north of England, and I just see people's eyes glazing over. And then a couple of years later, I'll get an email from someone who's been ripped off because they just didn't understand that. They didn't get stuff signed.
Yeah, well, I probably wouldn't be in a job if people understood those questions from the outset, because it is kind of the bread and butter of what we do in our office. And myself and Ben and Jenny spend a lot of time trying to signpost and explain to members the importance of copyright, the importance of registering their tracks with PRS and becoming a member of PRS, but also the distinction between the composition copyright and the sound recording copyright. I mean, one of the things that we have noticed in the advent of the digital age, I suppose, if I can put it like that, and a lot of artists are doing a lot more recording at home, so they tend to end up, if they do it correctly, owning the master, if you like. There are lots of studios out there who now are offering like 360 services, so that they'll offer everything that you need, from going into the recording the stuff to getting the CDs produced and all that, and even kind of helping produce it and managing you. And it comes back to the stuff that we were just talking about in terms of getting stuff in writing. But whenever you think of copyright, if you're recording stuff, you should always think about it in the two components that you've mentioned, so the composition and the recording itself, because they are different elements and the income streams from them are different as well.
Yeah, I think there's a really famous case you've all probably seen in the news in the last day or so with Rich Dashcroft, and that's a really famous case of somebody not really understanding the rights, somebody not getting samples cleared properly, and he's literally missed out on millions of pounds in PRS because of a simple thing that should have been sorted out before the song got released. So in terms of the actual sound recording, so normally it's whoever pays or provides the facilities for the sound recording owns that. So there's a company called PPL that deals with royalties. Whenever a song's used on the radio or TV, PPL collect royalties and pay it on to the performers on the recording. So 50% of the money they collect goes to the performers, and 50% of the money goes to the sound recording owners. So if you're an artist, record yourself at home, you're the rights holder, so you can join PPL and collect 50% of the income for that. But also make sure you signed up as a performer as well. So if you're singing on a track, if you're playing on a track, even if you've got nothing to do with the writing on the track, make sure you signed up with PPL, and you can get royalties every time those songs are used on the radio and TV. It's free to join PPL, so I'd recommend everybody join. As far as PRS is concerned, so we deal with the copyright in the compositions, the actual song. So we pay whoever writes the song or composes the song, and we also pay the publishers. So we will pay you royalties every time your song is used on the radio, it's used on TV, you play it in a live show, when it's streamed, when it's downloaded, when it's synced onto a film or an advert. So it costs £100 to join PRS. My job isn't about doing a sales pitch trying to get people to join PRS. It's just when it's the right time for you to join, make sure you're signed up. I speak to so many people who drag their heels, they leave it a couple of years and they lose out on that income. So every time like Rob on the previous panel plays you on like BBC Radio Introducing, we'll pay you for that. It's about 20p per minute on Radio Stoke. It might not sound a lot, but it does add up. When he recommends you to like Radio 1, it's about 12 quid per minute every time it plays. Then if it ends up saying it's on the background of like EastEnders, we pay about 90 quid per minute when your music's used on BBC One. Some of our biggest writers, some of our biggest members are probably people you've never heard of. They're just songwriters. In the last panel, they said about the average song in a top 10 being written by, was it 5.25 people? Like, they're people in the background making a lot of income because they're co-writing with people. Anyway, that's enough from me. So has PRS and PPL kind of been good income streams for you, Jen, and Chris as a manager?
Certainly, I think it's, as you sort of alluded to, it's quite difficult to, when you're first starting out, really understand what you're going to get out of it, because especially when you try and discover, okay, what might my royalties be? I mean, firstly, you're talking about something that you haven't necessarily earned yet, and secondly, all of the money that you do get from it can take quite a while to kind of drip through from its many kind of different like sources, I suppose. So it took, I think we signed up and it took us a while to really see much from it. And then I think you emailed me recently saying that my bank account had bounced and I had all this money just sort of stored up, and then I got a payment for £400 and I was like, whoa, okay. But it is really useful, and it kind of, as we've played more live, as we've had more radio play, as we've been all sorts of places, it really does kind of add up, and it starts to kind of come into its own. Certainly more than paid for the amount that we put in to get it, and PPL too. Like that's added up too.
Nice. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I actually do as a manager is ask acts, have you signed up for PRS and PPL? Have you registered your stuff? Because although generally when I chat to acts, we talk about it as imagine that income, we don't guarantee it. It's bonus money. We talk about it. It's not a guarantee for us at this stage. But then when we get a payment of £400-500 or such every so often, we go, well, that's great. That pays for the PR, or that pays for some extra CD duplication that we need to do. So whilst we don't rely on it, we find it a really valuable source. And I really encourage everyone to sign up. It's 100 quid for a lifetime. I dealt with a bassist in a band who never, ever signed up. And I kept seeing the songwriting royalties for everyone else. And I said to her, I just don't understand why you just don't do it. You'd have made your money back and more by now. And we still have this argument.
You might get some backdated money though.
This is a long time now.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm dealing with a band from Manchester at the moment who, they're a pretty big band. They played like Manchester Apollo, Kentish Town Forum. Their manager told them they were signed up, and I basically just emailed them on the off chance going, oh, do you want to meet up to have a chat about joining? And they were like, we're not members. And I was like, no, like, don't you know that? And then they were like, our manager told us they were signed up, and they've missed out on tens of thousands of pounds. And yeah, they sacked the manager, but yeah, that was nothing to do with me.
The manager.
Anyway, so moving on. So you've written the songs, you've got it all agreed, you've got it all documented. That's great. So now you might start playing live. With kind of the rise of streaming, you hear a lot of stuff in the press going, oh, even though streaming isn't paying anything, it's okay because live is making up for it. Is that just for arena bands? How hard is it for an artist to kind of make money on the road?
I think it's pretty hard. In our experience, we've not done loads of tours. We've certainly not done any proper international touring. We tend to. I mean, we mostly all work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You know, like everyone else. So we did a tour. I think it was last year where we had about 4 weeks, and we basically did Thursday, Friday, Saturday for 4 weeks, and luckily it was all in the same month and it kind of didn't look too weird on the poster, but I don't think anyone really cares anyway. But we kind of just did this dragged out weekend tour, which worked really well for us because it enabled, I mean, we had an EP coming out, we were releasing singles, it allowed us to not get fired and also play all of these places around the UK. So I think through being really, really economical about touring in that regard, and also the way that we did our tour. There's 3 of us in our band, and we don't have a crew unless we feel it's like a really important thing that we need someone to help us for. So we tend to kind of scrape by without a sound engineer, without a driver. But when we costed out that tour and we looked at all of the venues we were playing, all of the fees that we were going to get from it, and we'd obviously worked with our booking agent to arrange those dates in advance. We kind of looked at how we were going to do it, and we were like, well, this weekend we don't need to provide backline, so we will go in Chris's Skoda, and we will drive to Guildford, and we will play like London, Guildford, Reading, or whatever it was. And then this one weekend, we're going all the way to Brighton, and we're playing somewhere near Brighton. So this is the one weekend that we will hire a driver because we need to like provide backline. And then this weekend, there's 3 of us. We need to provide backline, but we can't really justify, like it's not as far. So we'll all get like hire a Salford van, hire a van, and we'll sit in the front of it, all the 3 of us, and we'll just like do everything, you know. So we kind of really try and figure out where we'll get the most benefit out of spending our money on things. And when we did have a driver that one weekend, it was like when we had really, really long drives, like in the middle of the night and stuff, and it would have been dangerous for us to do it ourselves. So I don't know. I think it's possible to make money. We made money on that tour, but it's not. It's quite a tricky art to master, I think, especially unless you're playing arenas, I suppose. But I say that not knowing what it's like.
Chris, kind of what's your experience? Have you kind of got any tips? Have you ever kind of negotiated any deals that aren't the norm that's help your artists make money?
In terms of touring?
Yeah.
So, do you know what? Most of the tours I do just about break even, which means as a manager I don't make any money, but that's fine, because that's not what it's all about. And we actually find doing spot shows are generally where we make our bigger fees.
Sorry, what are spot shows?
Just single one-off shows, rather than piecing together a tour. So Joe, one of my artists, for example, we went and did a show in Barcelona, a festival show, and we got £1,000 as a fee. And him as a solo artist, where all his expenses are covered as well. It's like fab. That's a really easy fee for us. So actually, I think you can make money off touring. It is really tough. And especially when you start taking crew with you. Every tour we do with Joe, we take crew. But I will be doing a US tour with 2 of mine in end of this year, which actually, because we've had funding support, will actually make complete sense. Otherwise, it would have been a really, really tough market, I think.
Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about funding a little bit later. In terms of live shows, one last plug for PRS, and then I'll move on. So PRS will pay you for pretty much any live show you play in the UK, whether it's like an open mic night, whether you play like piano in a restaurant, whether you're headlining in an arena. So for stuff like radio, TV, streaming, you should get paid automatically. The licensees basically send us, I think it was like 11.2 trillion lines of data every year, and we process all that and pay it out. Live is the only income source where the onus is more on the member to tell us. Simply, we don't know every gig going up and down the country every night. So we have kind of 2 schemes. We have a thing called the gigs, clubs, and small venue scheme, where if you're just playing like a local pub, local club, we pay a flat rate. It's about £9 per show. So it might not sound a lot, but if you're playing 10 shows, that's 90 quid. You'll have missed out on not being a member. When you get to the bigger shows, we take 4.2% of all revenue at a show and pay that on to the songwriters. So a lot of artists I speak to sometimes they make more money from PRS for the live show than they do from the promoter. They may get like, one of my mates went out on tour with quite a big indie band recently. They got paid 50 quid a night to support them. Then they got over 10 grand from PRS for basically playing half an hour each night. So if you're playing live, basically just make sure you signed up with PRS, because that's income you could be missing out on. And some people I speak to, basically, they work out the costs of a tour and they factor in the PRS. They know, as Jen said, it might take 12 or 18 months to come through, but it will come through eventually. In terms of people like Spotify now offer like Spotify for artists. Do you ever kind of use that data to kind of target where you're going to tour? Say you've got 10,000 people listening to you in Greece. Is that the kind of stuff you look out for when you're planning spot shows and tours?
Yes, as a manager, yes. I'm a bit of a data geek, so I actually use a platform called Chartmetric, and you can do a free version of that. I pay like £80 a month, but that really delves into fan data for me. I'm cautious to say we plan all our touring by Spotify or Apple or Deezer or etc. Because if you've been lucky enough to have some editorial playlisting on Spotify, completely skews your data and will completely throw everything off, not showing you really probably where your true fan base and your dedicated fan base is. So you need to take a really long-term view on that. I would always match that data alongside your social media data and alongside your Google Analytics and all the data you can gather, which is, there's massive amounts, your mailing list, all that, and piece it all together to create the locations you should really hit. But it is a massively valuable data tool, and obviously Apple has got its own Apple Music for artists, and Deezer is just getting to the point where it's doing its own backstage platform as well, so you can check that as well.
Yeah, I think we've certainly looked at all of these tools like Facebook Insights. I've used Chartmetric, quite like it, but I only have the free version. And especially, I mean, we released a single a month ago, and lucky enough to have it on some editorial playlists on Spotify, Deezer, and Apple Music. And so, yeah, I can see exactly what you're saying, because what was a tool where I could see we were maybe getting maybe 2,000 streams like organically on Spotify, much less on the other platforms, and you could sort of get an understanding of how these locations that these listeners within were kind of correlating together, whereas now it really does reflect the territories of the editorial playlists that we have been put within, which is incredibly valuable for us, but it is it's an interesting challenge to try and kind of convert those listeners who are seeing you in this playlist and experiencing your band, who are not fans of your band. Spotify will tell you that anyone who listens to your music is a fan, and it's not particularly true. I mean, it's hopefully some people will become fans, and it's obviously an awesome opportunity to get your music heard by all sorts of people all around the world. But it's really about like how they've experienced the song and whether they kind of click on your profile or save it. You know, it's actually, I suppose it's like the people who save your track, which you can see as opposed to just kind of consuming it and moving on, that you need to look out for.
So the Musicians Union have produced a fair play guide for artists who play live. What kind of things does that entail?
Okay, so what we're interested in relaying to our members and venues, actually, because we have a fair play venue scheme as well. The fair play venue scheme is about trying to get venues to sign up to our scheme, so we've got a database of venues that won't rip musicians off. So there's a certain set of principles in there about fair ticketing, fair splits, that kind of stuff. And it's similar principles really, in our fair play guides in terms of trying to educate our members about the best way to approach venues and organise deals with those venues really, and looking out for the pointers so you don't end up in a pay-to-play kind of scenario really. In fact, if it's possible, I'd like to come back on the last question that you asked, because being the dinosaur in the room here and having been in the same band for 25 years and kind of seen the changes in the way things that happened, the way that my own band did it, I guess kind of bucks some of the stuff that we've spoken about. We kind of did it the old-fashioned way. You know, we're gigging 5 nights a week, going to strange towns, including in other cities in other parts of the world, and doing that. We spent 6 weeks in Canada, travelling from one side of Canada to the other, booking gigs as we went along. It will probably make an interesting night's entertainment in itself. I'll tell you everything that went on during that tour that ended up with, like, we were almost arrested by the Canadian Mounted Police, but that's an interesting story. So in terms of those data analytics that you were talking about, we built up in the early days a paper list, the way that you would do it on a clipboard and stuff like that, and we used that for years to great success, really. And we've still got those people on board now, even though we went digital. But one of the things that we did notice when we went digital is that we lost quite a few of the paper-based data people, so then we had to work hard to get them back. And if you're a gigging band, I mean, one of the best things that we ever did, I guess, in the early days, because we were doing a lot of travelling, was buy our own van. Now, that probably might sound counterintuitive because there's a cost to that. But, you know, to go and do, 3 or 4 gigs in Germany or something like that, if you haven't got a vehicle, it can cost you 600 or 700 quid to hire a van. But we could get that back by spending £3,000 on a van over 4 or 5 weekends in Germany. So it's stuff like that. I don't know whether we're going to touch on merchandise and those other kind of things because we're talking about income streams. That's something else that we do. So we don't do unpaid gigs. That's the first thing that we don't do. We're kind of way beyond that. But we also tag our merchandise into the kind of gigs that we're doing as well. And in terms of PRS, I had a bit of a kick up the backside about 2 years ago, really, because we got a bit lazy because we hadn't done a new album for a while, and we'd stopped kind of sending in the PRS returns and logging the stuff on. And one of your guys turned up at one of our gigs. This was down just outside London. And I ended up having a good chat with him, and he was kind of asking about the band and how many gigs we were doing and all the rest of it. And we kind of got our shit together and started sending the returns in together. And then a few months after that, we're a 4-piece band. We were kind of recording our new album, so we weren't getting out and doing as much live work as we wanted. We all got a backs payment for about 1,600 quid for the previous year's work because we'd done kind of festivals and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a lifesaver financially because it was something that we could plough into the recording and stuff we're doing at that time. So if you are writing and you're not a member of PRS and you are gigging and doing your own stuff, you really need to join and send in your returns, really.
Great. So you just alluded to merch. That's literally my next point. I speak to a lot of people who make some crazy money, like from merch every night. Some metal bands who make like 20 grand a night just selling stuff. Have you kind of got any tips on merch? What's your kind of best sellers? Any do's and don'ts? Like tote bags. I love tote bags, but people like me give them away for free in the foyer. So.
Well, we've kept it pretty simple. I don't think we've ever really gone too off-piste with our merch. We've always had. I designed a T-shirt that says false advertising on it and has a picture of a TV, and we've basically just done that. We've always had the black version of it because people seem to like that, but every so often we kind of bring out a new colour, and that kind of reinvigorates it, and it's quite stress-free for us. But we've also we did our sort of first. We asked one of our friends called Tom Tommings, who's a really awesome illustrator who works with loads of other bands around Leeds, around the north of England, and we were like, please can you do a T-shirt design for us? So he did that, and then that sold way better than the one I designed. So we've kind of kept that one on as well now. And then obviously when you have a release, just make sure you have them on you, because the best case scenario when you play is you play to someone who's, well, not the best case scenario, but so many times it's happened we've played a gig to people who didn't necessarily come to see us, who were watching, and they're like, I really want to hear your music, what do you have to sell? And it's like, if you don't have anything, then you can't give them anything. So I don't know, like I think we were going for about half a year before we had any merchandise. And even I think yeah, I remember the first time I set up a merchandise desk, it was when we were like opening a gig at Academy 3, and like all of our friends like in Manchester came and bought T-shirts. I was like, yes, we made our money back. So it was really good.
Yeah. So I find merch invaluable. It's a whole nother, that can actually for me make or break a tour a lot of the time. Yeah, well, I've done crowdfunding campaigns, so I've done merch in crazy ways, like sitting in my office, in my top bedroom, hole punching music boxes with the song after transposing them, just for hours on end, so they will match up and I can send those out. I think one of the most successful things I've done we always do the standard stuff like T-shirts and live EPs and all that. But actually, I'm a massive believer now on single download cards. And I tend to do a single download card and then fling on the back a Spotify code. And if none of you know what a Spotify code is, come and chat to me at the end and I'll explain what it is. But that's a really easy way for me, because people go, well, I've got a single out, I'll do a CD. To be honest, when people give me CDs now, they just end up sitting in my car because I don't have time, really. So I'm like, send me a download, send me a Spotify link, send me a SoundCloud link, because I can just do it while I'm walking along and just listen. So I think be creative, though, with your merch. Stand out is really important, especially when you're on a bill with several other acts. People are going to be like, that's really cool, and I want to take that.
We for our latest single, we bought loads of lollipops, and we stuck a Spotify code on each and every lollipop. They were in plastic wrapping. Annoyingly, we've run out. Otherwise, I would give all you lot some. But they went down really well. You'd have this jar of lollipops at a gig, and you'd be like, "These are for our new single." And so we weren't selling them, obviously. But and then they'd all be gone within about 5 seconds. And then hopefully people would listen to it. People posted about them on social media though, which was a really cool thing.
I think it's also about the kind of music that you do, the genre. My own band, we're a bit of an alcoholic type of band, I guess, in the sense that a lot of our songs are about drinking and doing crazy stuff and stuff like that. So, for instance, when we go to Germany, we play a fair few gigs over there. We take British beer glasses with our band logos on, and they sell like hotcakes because the Germans love them, because it's something particularly English and curious. We've got songs, as I said, about beer drinking and whiskey drinking and all that kind of stuff. So we've had specially made hip flasks and stuff associated with that, and they always sell really well. And they're premium stuff as well. So it's not like a T-shirt that you might pay 10, 15 quid for. This is stuff that is 25 quid, 30 quid, and people, if they like what you do, they will buy it. And what we also did, we had a few. It's funny, interesting. You're talking about digital downloads and stuff like that. We're still doing it the old-fashioned way. We do downloads, but we take sample CDs with us. So as well as having CDs to sell, we'll have CDs that've just got a couple of tracks on them. Because inevitably at the end of the night, people say, "I really love what you do, but I ain't got no money left," because they've spent it all on something else. So if they're genuinely interested in what we'll do, we'll give them a CD. We'll tell them, what our website is and stuff like that. And generally, when we go back to the same venue again, because we tend not to just do the venue once. We'll go back and we'll, 6 months later or something like that. That's the next time we go. We'll end up selling 2 or 3 CDs to that particular person because we've had that good, customer interface. I know that's terribly marketing speak, but that's the way it works. People want to know about you and what you do, and they want that personal stuff when you're on tour, because they can listen to you on the internet, and that's fine. But if they're actually taking the trouble to come out and see you live, and you do a great show, they will want to talk to you, and they will want to find out what makes you tick. And if you can communicate with them in that way, you're establishing that customer relationship with them, really.
Great.
And get a card machine if you can get one as well. That's changed our lives.
So Chris kind of briefly mentioned crowdfunding, but there's also actual funding bodies that are about who help fund artists, help fund songwriters. Stephen, do you want to kind of tell us about some of the UK funding bodies that are out there?
Yeah, well, there was a little bit of a plug for the Arts Council earlier on. Salah's over there, worth speaking to, because they've got this new fund. There are PRS for Music Foundation, you've got one. There's Help Musicians UK as well. Some local authorities, less so now, unfortunately, because obviously we've had 9 years of local authority cuts that fund culture. But there are still small pots of money out there. So, for example, Birmingham City Council in October are putting on a weekender festival, and there's a significant chunk of money that's available there to put on stuff, so venues might be able to access. I don't know whether you know about this. So there's always little different pots, bits and pieces of pots of money to develop artists and put on tours. I mean, years and years back, my own band got some money from the lottery to go and put on a tour to go and do gigs in kind of disconnected communities, really, that wouldn't normally have touring bands travelling to them. So, you know, we ended up playing in very small arts centres and village halls and stuff like that, stuff that wouldn't normally have gigs on, but it just wasn't cost effective for us to go and do them as a band, so it was kind of subsidised. So there's lots of different little pots out there.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the PRS Foundation, which is
almost like a segue, isn't it?
Yeah, which is the UK's leading funder of new music across all genres. So we set up the PRS Foundation as an independent charity in year 2000, and since then it's awarded over £30 million in grants to over 6,000 projects. So these are grants we give artists, we give promoters, we give organisations. There's about a dozen different funds out there. Some of them are genre specific. They run multiple times over the years. There's stuff like there's flash funding, there's Emerging Artists Fund, which was run with Pledge Music, so we won't talk about that one. There's the Open Fund, right through to Women Make Music as well, to help support women, female creatives. Something I haven't mentioned, PRS has only got 18% of our membership is female, which is something really bad, which we're trying to address. So 5 years ago, we introduced the Women Make Music Fund, and since introducing that, so it's funds for up to £5,000, it's gone from 12% up to 18%, so it's still not great, but it is helping. Then there's other funds as well, like the International Showcase Fund, where if you're offered the opportunity to go to like South by Southwest, Reaper Balm, you realise it's going to cost you thousands to get over there, we can help fund you get over there. Jen, have you had any luck with funding from the PRS Foundation?
Yeah, we were incredibly lucky. We worked on an album in a studio last year, which is a kind of completely separate story. We got the opportunity to work in this amazing studio called the Church Studios with our friend who is he works there with, like, he actually kind of assists on some of the really, really big records with really, really big artists that are being made in that studio. And he was like, do you want to come in? I really want to work with you a lot on music. Do you want to come in and like work with me? And we were like, yes, please. So we ended up making this album with him. And so it's like through being a DIY band forever and then getting the opportunity to do that and finding someone to work with who we really got on with and really we kind of clicked, and it didn't feel like we were kind of going into this weird studio and doing like really polished things. It felt like we were all working together, and he was just kind of an extension of us really, and helping us do bigger and better things rather than weird new things. So we kind of had that experience all of last year. We were sort of chipping away at this record, and I kind of thought, actually, it's worth, like, this is probably the best position we've ever been in to try and, as an independent band, like apply for momentum funding through PRS. We've applied a couple of times in the past, not got it, but PRS have always been very open and kind of willing to give us feedback on it, encouraging us to try again. So I sat down and wrote the application, put in a few samples to the tracks that weren't quite like mixed, and not all the album was finished at this point, but we'd kind of tracked most of it. And we had this plan for how we were going to finish it, how we thought we might release it, and all that stuff. And then we were very, very lucky to get awarded momentum funding, and it's a significant chunk of money that has given us so many more options than we would have had, I think, at this point in time. So it's awesome. But yeah, we've still been very indecisive about what we're going to do with it, and it's taken us ages to finally finish it, but we've done it now. So yeah, later this year, hopefully.
Great. Chris, have you had any kind of luck? You mentioned you've done some crowdfunding before.
Yeah. So I've done a couple of crowdfunding campaigns now. So for an album I did with a band, I no longer manage them, but we crowdfunded 39,000. Spent a considerable amount on the producer, but and a great producer he is. A Midlands guy called Gavin Monaghan, who produced the Sherlocks recently. And that was really exciting, actually, doing crowdfunding, really tough, but hence why all the crazy merch ideas came out. We've done crowdfunding since for vinyl, recordings, and then, we've had I've had a couple of kind of funding opportunities. The most recent one is with one of my artists, Emma, and we've had kind of through the BPI and the Department for International Trade and Export grant, which gave us about 17,000 to basically take her to the US and tour, because she has a massive online following in the US. And so actually to take her from there and place her straight in the US and actually convert that into a live audience. So we're finally really excited. It's taken about a year. I've only been on board with Emma for like 3 months. So her other manager, I co-manage her, has all the crazy ideas, and then I work out how they actually work. So yeah, it's taken about a year, I think, for the planning to come together, but that's a really exciting moment. And without that funding, we probably wouldn't have taken Emma to the US just yet.
So we're going to move towards kind of discuss some music publishing a little bit. It's a bit of a not a grey area. It's a bit of an area of music industry that a lot of people don't understand. Stephen, can you kind of explain what a publisher is and kind of what they do, and then I'll tell a funny story after.
Okay. Well, I guess if you're looking to get your music out there, one of the smart moves you could make is try and find a publisher, to get your music out there. And we've got members who kind of earn a decent living, really, writing for publishers who are looking for particular types and styles and genres of music. So they'll have the connections really to hook you up with the people who want to get your music out there. They might, for instance, a film or a TV company might be looking to get you a sync. So if you've got a publishing deal, they'll do the legwork for you. Otherwise, you're a bit like a puppy running around all over the place. Really. That's how it was explained to me once, and it seems a fair enough way to explain it, really.
Yeah. And have you guys had any experience with publishers? How's it worked out for you?
We work with Centric on our publishing, and we've had an awesome experience with them. I think we didn't have anything to lose when we started working with them, but we did think about it very carefully as a completely like independent DIY band, and it's kind of like the first contract we ever signed, maybe one of the only contracts we've ever signed. But yeah, we were very interested to find out how much they take, where it goes, what they can do with our music. And we talked to them quite a lot about that. We kind of wanted to know what, in terms of synchronization and putting our music towards films or TV or whatever, we were quite sort of like, maybe we don't want to be on Tattoo Fixers, if you know what I mean. But we have been on Tattoo Fixers, and it was a really good experience for us. But we thought that was the kind of thing that we thought about. It was like, we were like, if it does come up, it would be a nice problem to have. But they got one of our tracks synced on I think it's a trailer for like a biopic of Steve Madden, who makes shoes. You know, the shoemaker in Wolf of Wall Street. I've not seen it, but it's about him. And we got quite a lot. Well, for us, it's loads. And we got about $2,000 from that. So, and that was just kind of, that just came completely out of the blue. They were like, "You interested in us putting you forward for this?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course." And so that's money we would not have got otherwise. So it wasn't a bad decision, I don't think.
Yeah, I think most of mine we try to exploit sync opportunities is primarily where we see income. Big up to Centric, really love Centric, and I've used them a lot and know the team there really, really well. And they do a great job on 30-day rolling kind of contracts, which is a really interesting model in the publishing world, and it kind of tore it apart a little bit for a while. But we also use non-exclusive sync agents as well. So we will pitch out, and actually we've seen quite a lot from companies in the US where they will kind of make £1,000 every 3 months or so for us and just shove it over, and we won't do anything. We'll have uploaded the tracks. I can look at the revenue streams, and that will just come through from non-exclusive placements that they've managed to get us. But yeah, I mean, for me, sync is just a massive opportunity. For me, you have to have the right kind of music, it is a really tough. There are certain genres and certain styles of music at the moment that are in, and it goes through waves of different genres. So it can do really well, but if you're really, really off-piste and really, really off-trend, no guarantees, I guess, with sync.
Yeah. I built up my story a bit too much. It's not that funny. But one of the acts mentioned in the first panel, who I will not say for obvious reasons in a second, I met the manager. It was the first manager they had. And we were just having a general chat. And I was like, oh, have you got a publisher? And they were like, it's too soon for a publisher. And I was like, it's not. You're clearly going places you need a publisher. And then he was basically said, they're too young for a book deal. I was like, that's not what a publisher does. And I had to explain to him what a publisher was. And then... yeah, they're no longer working with that manager. I seem to have a bit of a thing getting managers fired. But yeah, so even, just get clued up about the business, basically.
It's never too early to explore publishing. If the track is right and is there, people will show interest. And for co-writing as well. So another one of mine, what we primarily focus on with publishers is writing opportunities, putting them into writing sessions. So I think over the course of the past few months, we might have been in with 6 or 7 different publishers and just constantly going into sessions with producers, with other artists they've got, because if one of those, we'll do a quick demo and then they pitch it out to majors for an artist to pick up. And that is a huge other opportunity to take advantage of through publishers as well.
Yeah, and obviously there could be a world of difference between exclusive and non-exclusive. It depends sometimes how precious you are about what you do. If you're in a band and you're precious about the stuff that you do, then you might not want to get into that too much. But if you're writing and you're writing to create an income and you're not too precious about kind of the material that it's the best song that you've ever written, and then you find it on some ice cream ad or something like that, it might not be something that you want to do. So it will come down to how you view what you do and whether you want to make music from it. I mean, it can also be an income supplement. You can play in a band, you can still be a writer, but be writing and doing other stuff that will give you other opportunities. I mean, we've talked about sync into film, there's TV as well, games. Games is an ever-increasing market. I've got a friend who wrote a whole heavy metal track for some Japanese game maker, and he made a quite tidy sum from it, but he wrote it to order, basically. So there are opportunities out there, but I think you have to think very, very carefully about what it is you want to do and where you want it placed and whether it's the right thing for you, whether you should just license stuff, whether it's exclusive, whether it's non-exclusive. On our website, the MU website, we've got some really, really good information and some sample specimen contracts. So if you are getting into that game and you get offered a contract, you can check it against kind of our best practice and our notes and stuff like that. But equally, I'd encourage you, if you are kind of doing that and you're not an MU member, to join the MU, because we offer a free legal service that can assess and rip these contracts apart for you to make sure that you get contracts that are fair, whether they're exclusive, non-exclusive, whether you're signing all your rights in the track or whatever it is you're doing, really.
I loved it when we got offered a contract that I won't name any names, but when we were like really at the beginning of our band, we got offered, I think, a publishing deal, and we sort of took one look at it and we knew it was rubbish, and we knew we weren't going to even try and negotiate it, but we were really interested to understand exactly what about it didn't work. So we ended up, I don't think this is one I sent to the MU because I was a member, but I think I was a member at that point, or maybe I wasn't yet. But we asked loads of people, and we kind of got people to really explain to us exactly what about this contract wasn't great. And that really, really helped us in the future. Because then when you get ones that are kind of like, ooh, there's good and bad in this, it might be worth kind of discussing it, then you can go to an actual lawyer, and then it becomes a lot more valuable.
I always say make friends with a music lawyer. It's really, really valuable. So just by going down to London and really enforcing having coffee with a few music lawyers, now I have people I can send things to that they will just check it for me.
Or if you're an artist, you can join the MU, of course.
Or yeah. Look, I agree completely. get your contract checked and don't sign anything without anyone who has some understanding of it looking at it for you.
Yes.
We're way over time. I've still got one area I kind of want to quickly talk about before we open up for questions. Streaming, basically, it's out there. What's your opinion on streaming services? Is it still all about promotion rather than actually making any revenue? Can you see a day where you're actually going to make a decent living from streaming?
I think it can be exponential, can't it? You know, we've got members who don't make a lot of money or appear not to make a lot of money, and then something happens, they kind of go a bit viral, and all of a sudden they've got 60 grand that year from stuff like that because it's gone crazy. You know, I do think it's a build-up, really. If you're not doing it, I'd ask the question, why aren't you doing it, really?
For me, streaming is a massive revenue opportunity. Yeah, we all read in the news that it pays peanuts per stream, but it all adds up really quickly. As an example, there's a band called the Daydream Club, who are based out Leicester way, and they make enough to have bought their house from streaming because they have worked out how to look at the algorithms in streaming and look at how to put different songs and create different songs, particularly for streaming. So they don't really tour, and they do have a manager, but they do really successful off that. For me, I think if you hit 1 million streams now, it works out about 5 grand is roughly the still kind of revenue stream. That's on Spotify. And actually, it's really important to see it as a revenue stream. The industry has moved towards that. And as artists, you need to embrace that as much as possible and promote the opportunities that you get on there to reach an audience that you never would have reached before. So for me, streaming's still really exciting. It will be something new, I'm sure, in 10 years, and I will have to catch up again. But streaming is an awesome opportunity. So
I kind of think, well, when we started and we made and released an album really quickly, which some people, we recorded an album before we even played our first gig, which is a bit of a weird way of doing it, but don't regret doing it that way. But a lot of people will tell you never to do that. So we basically released an album quite naively, and we obviously put it on CD, we put it on streaming platforms, put it on Bandcamp and stuff like that. I suppose there's an argument if you do something like that potentially by putting it on streaming platforms, you're not necessarily, you might be stopping people who might buy your album from buying it because it's there to listen to for free, I suppose. I think if you're in that position, I can really kind of understand the value that you might get from not having it there, because I remember us kind of thinking about it very carefully, but we were kind of like, well, we're aware, well, we have basically no listeners anywhere at this point, and if we do put it on streaming services and we pitch it in the right way, then who knows, maybe it will help us reach a bigger audience. And that didn't happen on Spotify. Obviously, people that knew us were able to listen to us on that platform, which was great, and we didn't regret putting our album on streaming services or anything, but it took us years to have a song on a playlist, and we were doing what we thought were the right things over and over and over again, but we basically kind of, I don't know if we figured it out or we just got better, or it was Spotify for Artists platform, where you can submit your track kind of coming into existence. I think it was a kind of combination of things that our last 2 tracks have sort of been picked up in a way that has, we've found that people have gone to us on socials or come to our gigs and told us that they found us through us being on a playlist, and that's when it really makes a difference. And we had someone, we've had, it's things like we got put on a really big Brazilian playlist with our last single, and we have people asking us when we're like in a really serious way when we're coming to Brazil, and we had this radio station, like a really big radio station in Brazil, like ask us, like do an interview with us, and it's kind of like, this is all great, like this would not have happened if it wasn't for this. So it's we don't really see it as a money-making tool. I mean, we do get money from it, but it's more of an audience-building tool for us.
Cool. I think we're all going to hang around for a bit after, but has anybody got any quick questions they want to ask? Otherwise, we can just have a chat outside. Yeah.
Spotify playlists. So can you submit stuff through the Spotify Artists app?
You can now. They launched it just before we did our single before last. I think it was like last July. So yeah, if you signed up for Spotify for Artists, if you've submitted, I think they might have launched something where you can actually do all the uploads directly to Spotify now. We've not done that if it does exist. But if you have a digital distributor like AWOL or DistroKid, TuneCore, etc., once you've submitted your track through them to the streaming services and it's kind of in limbo before the release date, that's when if you go on that platform, it will show you that it knows that you have a release coming up, and then you can fill in all the information about it and basically kind of write your pitch. And we just like wrote in what playlist we thought it would go on, basically. And we were lucky enough that they sort of did what we said.
Yeah, you can do that. And then I think it's really important to get the right distributor. So I've worked with AWOL and had success, and then had no success. And now work with CD Baby. And because we've deliberately gone out to build relationships with the plugger for CD Baby who walks into the DSPs, then we've had success on other platforms. So Apple, we just had on one of them Today's Acoustic Hits, which is the biggest acoustic playlist across the world. So it was on 78 territories or something ridiculous. And so it's all about relationships, but finding that right distributor who is actually going to back you is really, really important. Not just one that's just going to upload it and go, great, we take our cut, or you've paid your yearly. Find the right one and build a relationship. Everything in this industry is based on relationships, and that is really key.
Brilliant. Right, I think we've got to wrap up now. So big thank you for the panel, everyone for coming, and also a massive thanks to Rich, Ben and Jeff, and everyone involved in putting this event together. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thank you for putting this together.